Are you getting fulfilled? Are you challenged? I think the biggest question is, are the people around you challenging you to actually become a better version of yourself? And if that's not happening, I think in life in general, not just to do with drinking, then there may be something to assess. It's the same as a relationship. I mean, I'm in an incredible relationship. My partner challenges me on a daily basis, and sometimes I'm wanting to punch a hole in the wall because she won't let me get away with anything. But then afterwards I'll assess and I'll be like, thank you so much, because you've helped me. It makes me realize all of these different things that are still blockages for me that I didn't know were there. You have to challenge and work through, and it's painful. But if you don't have those people around you challenging you, calling you out, whether it's a mentor, a friend, a family member, your partner, we're going to be unlikely to make those changes.
I hear you. It's natural to be loss aversive and to think about, oh, I'm not going to see my drinking buddies as often. But sometimes through spending more time in other settings, there's the potential to bring new people into our lives that may be both better aligned with our values and aspirations, and peer influences that help us realize them rather than the opposite.
Binges, blackouts, bad decisions, anxiety, regret, shame, resolving to quit drinking entirely, making rules to limit drinking, trying and failing again and again. Have you ever talked about wanting to change your relationship with alcohol only to fall back into the same habits? Unless you actually have a tangible and practical approach, it can be near impossible to make these changes. Today I'm speaking to Jonathan Hunt-Glassman about his journey from heavy drinking to moderation with the help of medication and the influence of peer groups on drinking behaviour. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it, with the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss strategies for reducing alcohol consumption and the positive changes it brings to your life. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Jonathan, so great to meet you, mate.
Yeah, likewise. It's great to be with you.
And it's exciting I would have actually invited you to do this in person if I knew you were in New York, because we've found out we're probably about 20-minute subway ride away from each other right now. So it's great to be here with a fellow New Yorker at the moment.
Absolutely. Next time in person.
Yeah, for sure. Would you be able to give me a little bit of your story and just how you came to be where you are now?
Sure. So I professionally have spent my whole life in healthcare as a product manager, strategy consultant, in-house strategy leader at some of the largest healthcare organizations in the United States. And then in parallel with that fairly traditional career trajectory, struggled with alcohol misuse pretty much my entire adult life. What started as binge drinking in high school and college became a pattern of drinking to blackout. And then as I saw peers start to grow up and put that sort of excessive alcohol use behind them, the opposite was happening for me. The problem was getting worse. And over those 15 years or so, it was no secret to me that I had a drinking problem. So I tried a lot of the traditional treatment options. But what ultimately worked best for me was setting the goal of moderation rather than abstinence, and using prescription medication to help achieve that goal. I was thrilled with those results personally, but it also opened my eyes to how much work we have to do to help all of the people who are struggling with alcohol. And so I tried to kind of bring together that professional background in healthcare, that personal journey into what I'm doing now, which is running a company called Or Health that tries to make access to medication that can help people drink less or quit more accessible.
That's amazing, mate. And I see so many parallels between my own journey and what you're talking about there. I had a binge drinking problem. I've worked in mental health for a very long time. And I think, especially for men, there's such a sort of, we're just misguided in that area. We don't really know where to go to get help, how to change it. And it's not talked about enough. And that I found that same thing where I was binge drinking to cope, drinking till blackout. I knew it was a problem. I didn't really think of it as a drinking problem per se for quite a while because everyone was going out in, Friday, Saturday nights, and it just got out of control. And, if I look back now, I'm honestly uh, feel very lucky to be alive because I was in more life-threatening situations than I can count. And the danger you put yourself in, it really terrifies me now when I think back on that and think how many other people are doing this, how many people are having something happen that is actually, fatal or long term, or they don't come out of this. So I think it's an incredible thing what you're doing.
Well, congratulations on your own journey to overcome that problem. I'm curious, what was the kind of turning point, and what did you find to be the right pathway for you? I'm a big believer that there are many different pathways to addressing all sorts of issues of addiction and compulsion.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think for me, it was just a very slow organic journey where I had this problem, and I was mainly from, I grew up in a well-known family in Australia. I had no self-esteem, didn't know who I was, wanted to be an athlete. That came to an end, finished school, had no, I was afraid of my own shadow, and alcohol was the only time I felt free and felt that I could be myself. And that went on for a long time. And then in the middle of doing that, I wound up, by a weird turn of events, having a modeling career, being asked to go on Dancing with the Stars, becoming quite famous in Australia, going out, having all of this attention from women when behind closed doors, I couldn't put two words together. I had no, I wouldn't go out on a date with a woman because I was so shy, but I'd drink, and that gave me this false confidence, and I'd be the life of the party. And that just really, without me knowing it, just conditioned this whole pattern. And it went on for so long that I was literally afraid to even, be intimate with women if I wasn't drinking. And it took until, I guess, because I just started really looking more into personal development. I was getting into mental health awareness, looking at myself, thinking, well, if I really want to actually become an example for this, I've got to make these changes to myself. And it was probably in the second half of my 20s when I really started to change those behaviors. I didn't quit drinking, but then I sort of just gradually, found a better path, grew in who I was, and yeah, was able to sort of move past it. And it's only been the last year and a half I've actually quit drinking. And that was more a personal choice. That wasn't because it was a problem anymore. It was more something I wanted to try, and I found the benefit of that so enormous that I've just stayed off alcohol now. So yeah, that's a quick version of my story.
It's a really amazing story and sounds familiar in certain ways, not the Dancing with the Stars part, but I think a lot of us find that alcohol at first is a very available, even pervasive way of, at least in the short term, dealing with something that makes us anxious, uncomfortable, unhappy. For me, it was largely social anxiety as well, whether kind of wanting to connect with peers or feeling more confidence with women. And then it can kind of slowly sneak up on us how reliant we're becoming on this substance, how the use of the substance is crowding out the development of more sustainable strategies and capabilities and muscles, so to speak, which creates this very, very negative cycle that can become debilitating before we even know it. But I think your story also illustrates that as dark as things can seem at times, change is possible, and it doesn't always have to be that maybe culturally received notion of hitting rock bottom, having a absolutely black and white transformation, moment in time. Often change is more gradual. We see that with our members at War Health too, where sometimes the first changes are almost infinitesimal. Putting off that glass of wine for an hour later than usual, taking longer to drink that second drink. And then those things accumulate over time. And a month or two later, they may be at a very stressful event and realize, oh, I've been here for 3 hours and I'm not drunk, and that can feel a little miraculous. But it often starts with very gradual changes.
I couldn't agree more. And, I think, it's great that we share these stories where, we've been through probably the more extreme end of it. But the core point, like you're saying, is we need to educate people and we need to provide systems and information where they can actually know how to make these changes before it gets to that problem. And like you're saying, it's conditioned behavior. It's a societal thing that is accepted. It's been just alcohol's part of society. We don't really talk about all of the negatives. It's accepted that we go out and drink. So until we start thinking about it differently ourselves, looking at it, making those little changes, it's like anything. It's like saying, well, I've never been into a gym before and I want to now start a whole new routine. If we just gradually go in there, we're going to probably see the benefit and over time want to stick to it. And I think it's a very similar thing. Would you say with alcohol, that's your experience? It's really just like learning about anything else for all of these different people coming to your, that you're working with. They just need to have that experience.
I think the exercise, fitness, health, and well-being analogy is a great one. I would extend it in another way, which is there are, of course, many ways to take care of oneself physically. Some people are going to really enjoy lifting weights. Others are going to enjoy group exercise classes. Others want to go for a run by themselves. Similarly, when it comes to changing one's relationship with alcohol, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. There are folks who are able to do it on their own through a mindful plan that includes specific goals and strategies to achieve them. And then even among those who want some professional help in the process, as I wanted and needed, it's also not one size fits all. We're probably all very familiar with mutual peer support, and that is an effective option. It includes organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, but also those like Moderation Management and Smart Recovery that take a little bit different approach. There's professional behavioral healthcare, working with a psychiatrist, psychologist, coach, counselor to address some of the thoughts, behaviors, feelings that may be contributing to drinking too much. And then there's prescription medication, which a lot of folks don't realize is in the toolkit. And what's great about those options, much like different ways of exercising our bodies, are that they're not mutually exclusive. Almost everything I mentioned is complementary, compatible, and in some cases can have compounding effects when combined with each other. So that's why I love what you said about kind of telling our stories and making sure that we're not just repeating the same story over and over again, because it's important that anyone who wants to drink less or quit can kind of see some stories out there that remind them of themselves and that they can hook on to in one way or another.
I love that. I love that example. And like you're saying there, that holistic approach, there's no one size fits all, but actually, and it's the same with mental health in general, when you're wanting to get help, it's really important to see a professional, but there might be 10 different things that work for 10 different people, but often the combination of the things that you need to do, probably what you're talking about there, won't only long-term help them with the drinking issue, but it'll help them with their own personal development, with their own mental health, with self-improvement, becoming more self-aware, maybe identifying other parts of themselves they didn't even know existed. So it becomes this like ripple effect in a positive way if you go down that path.
Those are some of the most inspiring stories I hear from our members, or people saying things like, I'm back to the mother that I knew I could be and that my kids deserve. I've lost 20 pounds. I've joined a soccer team in the neighborhood and feel so much better about myself. I'm back engaged in my work or my hobbies. It can be hard to even recognize how much alcohol or another substance addiction, compulsive behavior is crowding out the things that really matter until we reduce its effect. One of the doctors that we work with likes to say that even as you're saying less to alcohol, it's important to be saying more or a yes to other things in life, especially those that activate natural, healthy reward pathways,
Mm.
exercise, family, sex, all good things.
Yeah, yeah, very good point. So I'm interested in your journey with it. What do you think caused you to have that reliance initially? Was it a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is to try and help men? And I think, we we don't feel like it's okay to get help often or talk about our emotions as men. So I think that's a big part of why we often bottle up our emotions. But what do you think led you to going down that path? And how big of a change have you seen through your direct sort of circle of male friends, or was there any change when you did be that example and make that change?
I think no doubt alcohol for me felt like a way to form social connections that were hard or felt awkward, largely because it can be difficult for us men in particular to have authentic conversations, especially if they're
Yeah.
revealing some level of insecurity or perceived weakness. One of the worst experiences that I had multiple times when I was drinking way too much is a day or two later, someone would say to me, "We had such a wonderful conversation Friday night. It was so great connecting with you more." And I didn't remember it because I was blackout drunk.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways that speaks to what alcohol was providing, that ability to feel fewer inhibitions about opening up. And I think what I've learned since dialing the alcohol way back is it's not a prerequisite to being authentic, to having mutual disclosure and vulnerability. Those can be relationship building things with men or with women, um, without alcohol needing to be in the mix.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that to me sounds like one of, if not the most common thing for men. And, I see it in my direct circle where I've got friends at varying levels of, where they're at, and some that are very vocal about wanting to change their behavior, but just, don't know where to go, don't know where to begin. They want to have those conversations, but they just struggle to do it and rely on alcohol. And it's just such a vicious cycle that we can fall into when really the thing we're craving is like what we're doing right now, just having an open, honest conversation, not needing to have alcohol, just feeling like, what, it's okay. And I think everyone wants to do it. We just are feeling like our peers might judge us, or we might be seen as being less of a man or weaker or not as successful or whatever it is, when it just couldn't be further from the truth.
I think a lot of us who struggle with alcohol or find it seductive sometimes struggle with what psychologists sometimes call the spotlight effect, which is feeling like there's a spotlight on us. We
Yeah.
have to be perfect. Any deviation from that standard of perfection is going to be noticed and judged harshly by those around us.
Mm.
And it's just not what reality is like. And and I would imagine you and many others who've kind of cut alcohol out or back probably have had the experience of going to a social event of some sort, having a degree of anxiety about what's this going to be like, given that I'm not going to be drinking like I used to, and then finding that those fears are just way, way, way worse than reality. Even if there are people around us drinking heavily, they're probably more focused on how much on where they're getting their next drink rather than on whether we're having one. Sometimes we can kind of be our own worst enemy.
It's so true. It's like it's all in everything. It's always our mind. It's more creative than the actual situation, and I've experienced that since I quit, I was worried about that at the beginning, and I was thinking, oh, but can I still go out with my friends? And the very first night I went out, after I had a couple of non-alcoholic beers, and once it sort of wasn't talked about anymore, I forgot I wasn't drinking, and I was like, wow, this is actually better. And oh, I feel good. I feel clear. I'm gonna, you know what? I've had enough now. It's 11 o'clock. I'm going home. And I felt so much better. Woke up feeling great. And I had a similar experience when I was back in Australia at my sister's wedding, and that was sort of a year and a bit into not drinking, and everyone's drinking. It's a wedding. They're celebrating. It's such an amazing day. And I had this moment for about probably an hour at the beginning where I was feeling sad, thinking, oh, I just want to be able, mate, should I be drinking? I want to be able to embrace this with everyone else, get on their level. And I just sat through that, and literally another hour later, you just forget it. And I had the best time. And then again, by the end, you're seeing people, stumbling over, slurring their words. And I'm thinking, thank God that I made that choice. So it really is. It's just having to, we just need to experience that it's actually fine not to drink. All of these things we worry about aren't a problem. And, then if it's worried about, like what we were talking about, intimate conversations, or for me, being intimate with women, trying to talk to women, once you experience doing it without the alcohol, you realize, well, it actually goes a lot better. And you can then get the opportunity when you're sober to see what it looks like with the alcohol. And it doesn't normally go as smoothly as it goes in your head when you're drunk, when you see it. But I found fascinating the point you said before. It really resonated with me, where you were saying we often, the people that are binge drinking, to escape this feeling of that spotlight on you. My biggest issue has been being a people pleaser, and because I grew up in this well-known family, political family, we, from the age of 12 till 20, my dad was the equivalent of governor of California, so big spotlight on our family, and you're feeling like, well, if I do anything out of line, which I ended up actually doing, and it became in the news, it's going to be all over the media. And we need to behave, and we need to do this. Everyone's looking at us. They're expecting me to be this way. They know who my dad is. So you become conditioned like that. So because of that spotlight effect, that carried on to everything for me, and becomes obvious to me now, another reason why, that drinking was happening. So I found that really interesting. And as you're talking about there, I'm sure there's so many other people for so many different reasons that we have that same feeling. So that made so much sense.
Yeah, it's remarkable how we kind of we've now observed 30,000 or so folks at Or Health, and while the
Wow.
stories of what led people to have a problematic relationship with alcohol are as diverse as those, there are some commonalities, which I think include social, professional, family stress, alcohol being a temporary solution to that, or at least perceived solution, and then slowly but surely kind of taking control over one in ways that are detrimental to those same things, in kind of a sadly but deeply ironic way. The most vivid illustration of that point in my life was, we've talked about the way that kind of social anxiety was a significant motivator for my drinking. But at the worst, when I was experiencing kind of the physical and mental health symptoms of withdrawal from alcohol after a multi-day binge, I actually kind of heard, quite literally, voices in my head, auditory hallucinations that were in the form of peers whose opinions I cared about, talking about my drunken behavior. And it's just a little encapsulation of how the solution that alcohol provides, or the perceived solution, tends to be temporary. And it's that hard work of exposure to situations that feel challenging without alcohol, either because there's a stress, or we feel like we're missing out on something good, like you at your sister's wedding without it. It's that work that tends to be where the liberation lies. It's one of those situations in life where there's kind of no way but through the emotional work.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support. Yeah, and it's being honest with ourselves about that, because if we all sit back and look at, okay, what would my ideal version of myself be doing? How would I be behaving? Then it becomes very clear. So I guess, like you're saying, it's this temporary solution. It offers us that quick hit. We don't have to work to get that feeling. So then we just become reliant on it, and we lie to ourselves about why we're doing it. But if we really were honest, it's like, well, the ideal version of myself, would I do that? And that's when it really hit home for me. I thought, well, hang on, this is not the person I want to be. The best version of myself wouldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, at the same time, I think what's interesting about both of our stories is that when folks have become reliant on alcohol, either in a clinical way or a more casual way, I think it's perfectly natural to have some worries about how is this particular situation, how is this group of friends where alcohol is so central to our interactions, how is that going to work if I drink less or stop? And there are a few things that I've seen help folks through that very legitimate concern. One is to take kind of an experimental approach and say, I'm going to run an experiment where I don't drink at all at this next gathering of this sort. And that's maybe not a lifelong commitment yet, but let's see how it goes. That can sometimes be a way of easing into those positive surprises that we've both experienced without feeling like it's all or nothing. This all or nothing thinking is not necessarily helpful here. The second, along similar lines, is considering whether moderation rather than sobriety might be a way in. To me, when I knew I had a big problem with alcohol, sobriety still felt unachievable, at least as an immediate leap. And so moderation felt more approachable, at least once I added kind of specifics to it. The challenge about moderation can be a slippery concept. But I kind of set a bright line that blackouts were what I wanted to avoid because that's what I associated all my most negative experiences with. And then adopted some specific strategies: no shots, no more than one drink before eating something, to try to achieve it. So if folks are feeling, I think you can have two thoughts at once, which is like the clarity that drinking is not consistent with my best behavior, as you said, and some anxieties about what less drinking means. And that can be a situation where experimenting, trying different goals, trying different tools and supports can all be part of the mix. It doesn't have to be an on-off switch.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is like, it's going back to what you're saying before, where there's no one size fits all. It's going to be a different approach for everyone. And it can. And I know when I was in the middle of the sort of deepest part of my binge drinking, there's absolutely no way I could have just gone off alcohol completely. It took me until recent times to probably be in a space where I could have done that. And, but that's not necessarily the solution. That's just been more a personal life choice for me, but not because of it being a problem. So alcohol's fine if you're doing it in moderation, but it's just like you're saying, how can I change this behavior that suits me? Maybe some people actually might need to go cold turkey because one drink means 10 drinks. They just don't have that control mechanism. Other people, it might be similar to your situation. So I think it just feeds back into the point you're saying that we need to just be aware of this and, have our own approach, trial and error, try what works. So as you were talking about that, you were talking about, the peer groups. How big of an influence do you think it plays? Again, if we're looking at, men, for example, we often, might not even agree with the values of this group of men we're around, but because we want to fit in, we want to impress, we want to all, puff our chests out to each other, we just go along with the behavior. So I guess two parts to this question. How big of a role does that play, do you think, in our behavior? And then number two, do you think there are situations where we need to actually assess whether we even should be around these people? Because I'm sure there's many where it needs a conversation and, we can talk to our friend, change the behavior. But are there some where we actually realize, you know what, I just actually need to get away from these people and change my circle?
I think the first part of the question is the easy part. The second part is more nuanced.
Yeah.
Hear your thoughts on that too. I think first, indisputable that as such social creatures, the environment, particularly the people in the environment, have an influence on our behavior. We may all have different biological susceptibilities to addiction to something like alcohol, but that's not the whole equation. Who we're around, what they're doing, what examples we're seeing, what's treated as normal behavior, even if it's way outside the average or mainstream of how people are actually using alcohol, all key factors. The tricky part here is if for those of us who misuse alcohol over years and decades, the sad reality is our social circle tends to be more and more composed of people who are also misusing alcohol. Our social life tends to be revolve more and more around alcohol, which can make it so difficult to make a meaningful change in our drinking behavior without disruption to our social environment. I think I come back to no one size fits all answer here, but definitely worth thinking about this factor. I think there are instances and certainly examples of people who are able to cut back or quit while keeping some of the most important people in their life remaining the most important people, even if those people are heavy drinkers.
Yep.
So I'm not of the school of mind that says you need to cut out every single person who drinks for the rest of your life. I think that might be right for some people, but that's a pretty tough prescription to swallow. But I think there are some important questions to ask. Who am I around when I'm drinking way too much? What are we doing? Where are we? And then which aspects of that can I change? Does it mean I go home at 10 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock in the morning before the really heavy drinking gets started? Is it meeting up with some of those same people, but in a very different environment, going for a hike in the morning rather than meeting at a bar? Is it taking a break from those environments for these next 6 months when I'm going to try and make a meaningful change, saying not, it's not forever, but for the next 6 months, I'm skipping Thursday happy hour. So I think there are a lot of options, and it would be a disservice to not at least consider environment, peer group. We know it matters. What would your advice be to someone? And then, because I think it's a difficult question.
I think that's a great answer, what you're saying there. I think, and as you're saying that, one of the things I think for someone that's wanting to start to change that behavior would be things like you're saying, you've got to fill your time with other things, So if you're going out on a Saturday night, try and organize, make yourself accountable to go for a hike, at 9 or 10 a.m. on the Sunday morning. So you've got something to look forward to and you've got a reason to come home. I think if we don't have any reason not to do it, and you're in that behavior pattern, it's almost impossible to change it. So I think that's a really important one. But I would say, like you said, it's very nuanced with assessing the people we're around. I think we often, I know for me, it's a combination. If I look back, I had people around me that, I'm still friendly with, but they're not the kind of people that I would, as my best self, be associating with on a daily basis. And it's not because they're, worse or there's any problem. It's just we're different people and they had different things they wanted, so I moved on and found people that I was more in line with. So I think it comes down in my mind to really getting in line with your value system and what you want out of life, and are you getting fulfilled, are you challenged? I think the biggest question is, are the people around you challenging you to actually become a better version of yourself? And if that's not happening, I think in life in general, not just to do with drinking, then there may be something to assess. It's the same as a relationship. I mean, I'm in an incredible relationship, very lucky with my partner, and she's from the psychology field, and she challenges me on a daily basis. And sometimes I'm wanting to punch, a hole in the wall because she won't let me get away with anything. But then afterwards, I'll assess and I'll be like, thank you so much, because you've helped me. I realize, it makes me realize all of these different things that are still blockages for me that I didn't know were there. you have to challenge and work through, and it's painful. But if you don't have those people around you challenging you, calling you out, whether it's a mentor, a friend, a family member, your partner, we're going to be very unlikely to make those changes.
I hear you also being so growth and opportunity minded in your descriptions of those considerations. It's natural to be loss aversive and to think about, oh, I'm not going to see my drinking buddies as often. But sometimes through spending more time in other settings, whether it's our church or place of worship or a local community group or dog owners, there's the potential to bring new people into our lives that may be both better aligned with our values and aspirations and peer influences that help us realize them rather than the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your relationship with alcohol like now?
So my goal has always been to drink in moderation, and it's one that I'm proud to say I've been able to achieve over the last 5 years. So I will still have a drink with dinner or at a baseball game. But two big things have changed. One is, particularly with the help of medication in my toolkit, I don't lose control in the same way after that third drink or so, where it used to feel like there was a runaway
Mm.
train towards 10. It's easier to make the decisions that I want to make, live the way I want to, as you've described. And second, I'm not seeing alcohol create the same negative consequences, the same physical and mental health negative consequences, the same strain and breakages of relationships, the same stress on professional performance. And that's how I like to define recovery from an alcohol problem, is being able to stop or control alcohol use and get away from all of those harmful consequences. Sobriety is a great way to do that. For me, it's been moderation. I guess if I had to sum it up, I'd say like I feel like I've taken back control over alcohol rather than alcohol having control over me.
That's great. I love that, and I think it's a really important example for anyone listening. It's not about having to go down the path of sobriety. It's about just making these changes and finding that moderation. I think the medication example as well is a really important one because that can be so important, and we often need that extra bit of help. And it's not saying you're just relying on that one thing. That along with the other parts can be really important. And I think there's a lot of stigma still around that, but there shouldn't be. It's like it's just there to assist in the process, like anything else. We take supplements to help with uh, repairing our muscles. We take medicine if we're sick. We, all these different things that aren't a big deal. It's there to actually aid you in this positive process. And I think the more people that can understand that, the better, because all of us need that helping hand at certain times with whatever we're changing.
My philosophy is we need all the tools that are safe and effective and we can get our hands on.
Yeah.
So mutual peer support, working with a professional, and medication. It's unfortunate that in this realm of drinking in particular, addiction more generally, medication has been historically underinvested in from a research and development perspective. And then when we do have effective medications, as we do in regard to alcohol use disorder, awareness and utilization are really shockingly low. About 2% of people with alcohol use disorder have been prescribed any medication to help them drink less or quit. Doesn't mean the other 98% should be relying on medication alone, as you said. Of course not. But you got to think in that 98% are a lot of folks who could benefit with medication as part of the toolkit.
Yeah, we need to know what options are available. I mean, to me, it's again like the example with exercise. If I knew nothing about exercise, didn't know how to do it, where to go, if I was told there's only one option, that you need to go to this particular gym, this is the only way to get there, and there's I might feel intimidated. I don't want to do it that way. But if I was told, hey, here's 20 different ways you can do it, you know what? You could even in your living room online do a session with someone and just be walked through a couple of really simple things that just ease you into it. We need to be presented with all the options, and I think so it's really that educational piece in my mind that's the most important.
Yeah, you're really
Yeah.
voicing one of the reasons we, started Or Health, with an
Yeah.
emphasis on private, convenient access to medication. Is across this menu of safe, effective options. It's one of the most underused. It's one that we have the least awareness around. The medications in question have been generic in the United States for 30 years at this point. And as a result, there's no pharmaceutical company that's spent hundreds of millions of dollars making them household names. And so we saw an opportunity to kind of help people by raising awareness and then making the access more convenient. I think any of us who've gone through a journey with alcohol use know that motivation to address the problem waxes and wanes. And the great thing about the rise of telehealth in recent years is we can be there to help someone get started at whatever moment they have built up the awareness, the motivation, the readiness to take action, even if that's 2 a.m. in their living room, as you said.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about your company, about Or Health?
Sure. So the main goal is to help people get access to medication that can help them drink less or quit. So at orhealth.com, folks can learn more about what alcohol use disorder is, what medication assisted treatment is. These are not household terms. If it feels like medication might be a good fit for them and their goals, they can connect with a doctor or a nurse practitioner who's licensed in their state. We operate in 41 US states. And if appropriate, get a prescription for medication, most often a drug called naltrexone that helps to cool off the pleasure and reward that we feel when we drink, and then over time reduce cravings for alcohol. And then members can get that medication either at their local pharmacy or shipped to them from one of our partner pharmacies, which a lot of people choose for the privacy and convenience benefits. And then around the medication, folks can join our private members group to connect with others like them, get other sorts of digital and physical resources from us, and then, of course, get recommendations and referrals on what else in their community or online might be a good complement in the recovery toolkit. As I said before, so far we've served about 30,000 people. The majority report that they're often or always meeting their goal, whether that goal be to drink less or to quit, and about 60% join with the goal of moderation rather than sobriety. And then when we administer kind of an objective measure of how much they're drinking, most are at either not drinking at all or at a low or moderate risk level of drinking versus generally coming in with very, very high levels of risk.
It's incredible. Well, yeah, congratulations on that, mate. I mean, it's incredible serving that many people, and what you're doing with it, creating a tangible solution for people like that. I know if you are expanding overseas, Australia could definitely also use something like that. So, uh, yeah, very needed, very needed. But and for everyone listening, go to the show notes. We'll have a link to the company website in there. So if anyone wants to check it out, make sure to have a look. So, one final question on your personal experience. What would you say are the biggest changes that you've experienced? I mean, you've touched on this quite at different various times, but the biggest changes you've experienced in your day-to-day life, your experience, your ability to achieve joy, your happiness, your meaning in life. What have these? What's been the sort of changes for you over time since you have made that adjustment with the drinking?
Be very literal about it. I wake up earlier, feeling better. I'm able to take care of an adopted dog for which I always wanted a dog, but never felt like I had my life together enough to pull it off. I do now. I find that I'm able to have more authentic conversations with people that I care about without relying on alcohol to do so. And then, as we've talked about, I've been able to kind of bring my personal story and professional background into work that feels very purpose driven and meaningful.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. I love that. And are there certain things you do every day for your mental and physical health, whether that's exercise? I mean, you're saying getting up early, different things that work for you?
Definitely always room for improvement on that front. But,
For all of
I
us, yeah.
found that getting outdoors and exposing oneself to sunlight as early as possible is helpful. And then in the evening, setting aside 30 to 45 minutes to be phone free. 2 hours would be better, but 30 to 45 is where I'm at. And reading a book, an old fashioned Dead Trees book.
Yeah, love it, love it. Well, we just finish up with a few closing questions here. The first one I want to ask you is, to you, what does it mean to be a man?
That is a fantastic question, and one that I think we as a society and individuals are struggling to answer at the moment. So for me, it's ambition, being reliable, and extending care towards those that we care the most about.
I love that answer. That's great. For anyone listening, I think that's a really good example. What do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in the world at the moment?
I think our environment has changed so much in modernity in ways we're not necessarily wired for. So, smartphones is an example I think about a lot because I struggle with it. They hijack instincts that were probably necessary for survival millennia ago and translate now to anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And so I think finding ways to maintain control of our environment rather than being in the wind and mercy to the very absorbing digital and associated social pressures and flashing lights is something I think we're all struggling with. And please don't ask a follow up question about solutions because I'm still trying to manage that myself.
Oh, I feel anxious just hearing you talk about it. And literally, end of every podcast episode, everyone has the same answer: phone, social
Interesting.
media, and it's same thing for me. It's just like it's terrifying to think about because I can't see a solution, but it is overwhelming. It's not healthy. Yeah, it's not good. It's a bad one of the negatives. But anyway, I think it's a very very common answer there. Would you say your younger self, when you were binge drinking, was happy? And are you happy now?
I think I've been able to, achieve a deeper reservoir of well-being and satisfaction. Um, I still have moments of unhappiness. Being the leader of a small business is an inherently stressful situation. I think I'm better equipped to deal with those moments by falling back not on alcohol, but on values, purpose, and the most meaningful relationships. So, day to day, happiness meter, I don't know, maybe neck and neck. But in terms of kind of deeper sense of contentedness, definitely a big improvement.
I think that for anyone listening again is a really good answer because there's no such thing as, no matter where our life's at, we're going to have ups and downs every day. I know, I run a business as well, and I know the constant stress and how some days you just, you don't want to get out of bed, and it can just be so overwhelming. Some days are amazing. So it's really about the deeper meaning of, feeling aligned with where we're going is the thing we're hoping to achieve. So great answer. Final one here. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud that I've become a more reliable family member and partner, for my wife, for my sister and parents, for my dog, who I consider a family member. Alcohol for me was such a selfish choice, in that it made me feel great in the short term and allowed me to forget about responsibilities beyond myself. But as we've touched on, I think those responsibilities are one of the best parts about being a man, and one of the most meaningful parts of life. So I'm proud that they have a more prominent role in my life these days.
Yeah, you've touched on a really important thing there with the responsibility part. And again, just, I've had my own experience with that. I think so many men have, where we think we want to be free. And I've always said that mantra: I want to be free, no responsibility. I want to be so successful so I can just do whatever I want. But I've never felt content when that happened. I felt out of control, overwhelmed. Whenever I've had responsibility, when I've made those decisions, when I've had accountability, when I've had to be there for my partner, when I've had to, be there for my business, it might be harder, but you feel better. You're proud of yourself. You can look yourself in the mirror. You feel your anxiety go down. So I think that's a fantastic way to finish for men, for anyone really. Having that accountability and not trying to escape is a lot of the time going to lead to, a lot more contentment. It might be harder, but it's the better path. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and making the time. I've really enjoyed this. I think I could talk to you so many other questions I want to ask, so maybe we'll have to have you back on here in the future, mate. But love what you're doing, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
Thank you, Nick. It was so nice talking with you.
Thank you, Jonathan Hunt-Glassman, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send a DM. Your feedback's always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.